Was there more to that piece that you were just...
I don't know, what was I saying? I was saying something about
Well, let's talk about the other cast members that were there.
There was Catherine Hellman, Billy Crystal, Richard Mulligan, Kathy Damon, Ted Wass, Bob Johnson, I believe his name is.
Had you known any of the cast before you worked on Soap?
I think I had met Kathy Damon years ago in New York once, but that's all I knew.
And are there some memorable experiences during the show with Billy Crystal or Richard Mulligan or Catherine Hellman?
No, not really. Catherine and I became great friends. We go to dinner now. She and I and her husband and Donna.
Was Soap actually a hit from the time that it premiered in '77?
It was with certain people, but because of the controversy generated by the moral majority, it was always it always performed rather fitfully. It never reached its true numbers, I don't believe. And ABC sort of caved and started putting it on at 11:30, where it couldn't really reach much of an audience, although it might have reached its core audience because they would wait around for it.
Now, you described the reaction of the audience when you would walk out in front and they would explode with applause. Did you ever have any reaction to the fact that it was an African-American playing a butler? Did any of the negative response to that character ever come from any place?
No, I never heard it. It was only later that I found out that if you were playing a butler, to the African-American audience, if you were playing a butler, you weren't worth considering. Very few people looked beyond the title of what I was playing to what I was playing. I think it's one of my, I'm very, very proud, not only of my work on the subsequent show, Benson, but very proud of my work on Soap, because it was there that I developed, in my mind, I developed a way of playing that was true. I felt also that there must have been a lot of people like Benson out there who really disliked their relationship with white people, but were unable to say it. Moreover, I think the character struck a chord with white people who wanted to tell the boss to shove it, but couldn't. And Benson became a benchmark for them also. I don't know, I keep getting flashes of things I want to say, but they keep skipping. They keep...
Whenever they come up,
yeah.
Offer them. Talk to us a little bit. Tell us about the relationship with Susan Harris over the course of Soap.
It was very interesting. She was always very generous to me. I thought she had a little problem with me. We had one incident where Benson was going to be seen outside of that household for the first time. And the reality of what those characters meant to one another had never really been discussed, was because we were, so farcical. But to me, I retained I went for a realistic relationship. In other words, in the final analysis, he does get paid for this job, and he's not doing it just out of the goodness of his heart or because he's so in love with white people, or you can hire somebody and you don't have to pay them. So I was going for the reality of, yeah, well, he does make a living out of this. And I was also going for the reality that a black person would do things differently than white people. In other words, I would wear clothes. I might spend more money on clothes. So when Benson was to be seen outside the house on one occasion, Jessica had been put in jail for the murder of Peter, and so he brought Jessica some food in jail. Well, they had a suit for me to wear, and it was really like a little dumb suit in my mind. It might not have meant anything else to anyone else, but to me, it was like, I can't wear a suit like this. I wouldn't wear a suit like this. I didn't invoke much of that. He wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that. I didn't invoke much of that because I didn't have to, because Susan was writing so well for the character, even though skimpy, even though what she was writing, I always felt in my actor's head, my ego, that I wasn't being serviced, certainly not enough. I mean, why did these people have any lines, So, but I had to wear this suit, and this suit had, the pants would hike up in front, and, your ankles were exposed and whatnot, and it was gray, and they had a little vent in the back of the coat that was about like that, and the coat came above your buttocks, and it was just a dumb-looking suit that I said, I can't wear this. And so the costumer said, well, you're going to have to wear it. And of course, that hit the button, I said, I don't have to wear anything. Well, you'll have to talk to the producers then. So I said, where are they? I'll talk to them. So they got wind of when I was coming up there. So as I opened the door, one of them, I think it was Susan, said, what is it now, Robert? Because whatever occurred in the script from week to week, if it was something that everybody knew would get under my skin, they'd be watching me to see what my reaction was going to be. So that's why she said when I opened the door, what is it now, Robert? I said, Susan, I can't wear this doggone suit. She says, why? I said, well, it looks funny. I look stupid in it. I said, this guy's been shooting off his mouth here for 13 weeks, and I think I have some responsibility to black people not to be seen as a buffoon. I'd forget that, etc. So I said, well, maybe you can forget it. I can't forget it. And so she said, well, no matter the suit is dumb looking, you can't be dressed in Savile Row. And what I wanted was it was just a nice looking suit. They had already gotten it because at my insistence. Well, you can't be dressed in Savile Row. I said, it's not Savile Row that I'm worried about. It's Catfish Row that I'm worried about. I don't want to look like I came out of Catfish Row, Porgy and Bess. So they didn't think that was funny, but I thought it was hilarious. And but I'll just use the word, I prevailed. And from that point on, the character had a substance to him. If I had worn that suit, it'd been, but because I wore a different suit, it was a nice looking dark blue suit, and if I may say so myself, I looked pretty decent, you know.
Now, Soap was on the air for how long? How many
4
episodes?
years, and I did it 2. I got spun off after 2 years.
And was there any, that was a good struggle, were there any favorite episodes of yours that we haven't touched on?
In Soap?
In Soap.
I think one of my favorite episodes was the one where we went to this cult and rescued Billy from the clutches of this cult. And we all went as 4 black people, 4 black guys. I, of course, was in natural blackface, and they put on blackface. And it was John Biner, and the guy playing the grandfather, playing Jessica's father, and Bob Mandan, I believe. Mm-hmm. We all 4 went to this cult headquarters to rescue Billy and the guy, and we were sneaking around the place, going in behind pillars and whatnot. And some guy came up on us and said, "What are you doing here? What do you want?" He asks me. And I said, "Oh," I had to make up something. So I said, "We are the 4 Step Brothers, a tap dancing team. And we are going to do the entertainment." So then the 4 of us, and they were in blackface, and we each tap danced. We did about 2 minutes or a minute of tap dancing, all 4 of us, and that was hilarious. It was hilarious.
There were a couple of other writers who worked along with Susan Harris, J.D. LeBoux, Dick Clare, Jenna McMahon. Did you have any different relationship or a special relationship with
Well, J.D. was a director.
Ah, okay. Now, who presented the idea of spinning off Benson to you, and when did that happen?
Well, the producers, Tony Thomas and Paul Youngerwit, said they wanted to do it the following season, and who was I to tell them that they couldn't do it?
Now, that was 1979?
Right.
And did you have any concerns about leaving the hit show Soap and starting your own?
No. I welcomed the idea. I really wanted to. And besides, Soap wasn't a hit. It played well before people who really liked it and couldn't live without it, of which there were legion. I mean, there were many, many people who really loved Soap. And if you see it to this day, it still holds up. It's a marvelous show. Incidentally, I might add, Susan Harris wrote the first 2 years of Soap by herself. She's prolific.
So all of the episodes that you were in effect, were written by Susan. Now, what was the premise, what was going to be the premise of Benson when it was spun off?
I was going to get Jessica had a cousin or something who was governor of a state, and he needed a major domo, if you will, butler. So I went to the governor's house and began work on that.
And the team, did you have any influence in the development of the premise of Benson or the choice of any of the people involved in that production?
No, I didn't seek any. No, I didn't.
Okay. And did you make any changes to that character when you brought it over?
Well, we had to, I think, of necessity, we had to soften the character a bit. On soap, he'd been outrageous. I mean, he'd really, done outrageous things. I incidentally think that Benson on soap I enjoyed more than Benson on Benson, although I like the money on Benson better. But we had to change him in the sense that we had to soften him a bit. Since he was going to be the lead character, there had to be some edges taken off. And in that sort of way.
And what kind of who was the cast that was created around you in Benson?
There was James Noble, Renee Aubergenois. We had a girl by the name of Caroline McWilliams, Inga Swenson.
And who wrote the initial episode? I mean, the
Susan.
pilot? Susan. And did she write much of Benson?
No, I don't think she wrote much thereafter.
Now, Benson was categorized as a, well, where did it fall in terms of a category of show or audience? Neither white nor black, or?
Well, no, and it's been one of the things that sort of makes it kind of bittersweet to me, that Benson is neither thought of as a black show nor as a white show. Not as a black show, because certainly we weren't, I was the only black character in it. But since I was the lead, it wasn't a white show. So whenever we're mentioned, Benson is never mentioned. I mean, the show Benson is never mentioned because in this crazy society we have, where things have to be either one thing or another, otherwise people can't deal with it, when in fact the whole country, I mean our whole idea for existence, a reason for existence, was supposedly our diversity. But in this society where people are not accustomed to dealing with, they have to have a thing, well, this is a white show, this is a black show. That show gets overlooked, I think, for its consistency of excellence. It was a funny show.
Tell me about the preparation, daily preparation for Benson. How you went about working on that show now that you were the star.
I didn't do anything in particular, I don't think. I perhaps spent a little bit more time staying ahead of my lines and whatnot, but I didn't do anything in particular. I was always an actor who never committed much to memory. I depended on repetition to get it into my memory. We'd usually have 3 or 4 times we would do it before we would tape it or film it, tape it. And so I depended on those times to put it in my memory. But I didn't spend a lot of time, for instance, at home poring over it and committing it to memory.
And what was the chemistry like between the other actors on the set on Benson?
It was very, very nice. It was a very pleasant atmosphere. We never, there was no shouting. There was very little resentment about one thing or another. we all got along very, very well.
Now, the character changed its profession and developed over the course of its years on television. Would you describe that?
Well, I had always wanted Benson to embody the American dream, and that is that you go from one place to another, to another, to another. And it seemed to me, I wanted the arc of the character to start one place and end up in another place. And I really wanted sociologically, I mean, I always had these pretensions. Sociologically, I wanted African Americans to see or to feel that it was possible to start as a butler and end up, it was perfectly logical because we knew he was an intelligent man. We knew he was witty, we knew he was sharp. So why shouldn't he develop that? And so I went to night school, which we mentioned several times in the script, and I went to law school. And so it was quite understandable that I would end up being someone who could be considered for lieutenant governor. And I went by stages from butler to head of household affairs to budget director to lieutenant governor. And our last episode was I was running for governor.
Now, did that process, the development of that character, come out? How did that come about in the writing process? I mean, did you speak about that to Susan Harris, or?
Well, Susan wasn't doing the show at the time. She only did the first episode. And so we dealt with the other producers. Bob Fraser was one. Bob Caleri, Rob Dames. They were the producers and execs at the time.
And did you bring your idea to them, and then how did they respond in that dialogue?
There wasn't any resistance to the idea. It was just something I said, well, you remember now, we've got to put in so-and-so and so-and-so, and we've got to do this. We've got to upgrade this character. And I remember thinking also and telling them at the time that you can't make the governor too silly. I mean, we had to guard against the relationship between Benson and Krause always worked. There was a certain kind of naturalness to it. It was kind of natural that we might be enemies, and we would have some fun with that. The other characters took a bit of juggling and whatnot. For instance, with the governor, I had to tell them, don't make the governor too silly. Because if the governor is too silly, then what am I doing here? Who am I? I have to be silly right along with them. So the governor has to stand for something. He can be perceived as a bit of an airhead, but he has to his ideas must have some substance and soundness, because if they don't, then no one else amounts to anything.
Favorite episodes in Benson?
Oh, I think the episode where I was a stand-in for a visiting African diplomat, or head of state, who had been targeted by his enemies back in his home for execution. And he was in our state trying to drum up business or something like that. And when we found out that he was targeted for execution, Benson had to stand in so they could catch this guy. So I had to wear the African robes and whatnot and speak in a kind of pidgin African accent. So that was my favorite episode. I enjoyed it a lot.
Now, behind the scenes in both Soap, and now in Benson. Are there any African Americans working on either of those shows? Were there?
There may have been a cameraman or two over the years.
And what about executives?
No executives.
At all?
Mm-mm.
You won some Emmy Awards.
Yeah, I won 2. One for supporting on Soap, and one for Best Actor as Benson, on Benson.
Was Jerry Seinfeld on Benson?
Mm-hmm.
And what role did he play?
He came in to play a role that they had written for him, that he was going to be a joke writer for the governor. And that's what he came in to do.
And was he successful in that role on the show?
No, but I don't think it was Jerry's fault. It had nothing to do with his talent or anything. I think it had more to do with the fact that it was an idea that was not as well supported as it should have been.
Now, you had a number of directors work on that show.
Yeah.
Do any of them stand out as?
Well, of course, Jay Sandridge, my good buddy, who is one of the most remarkable comedy directors. And Jay goes way back. He goes way back to the Dick Van Dyke Show, to All in the Family. He marvelous comedy director. I loved him. You could always count on Jay to be able to enlarge the comedy in any given script, because he had such an infectious sense of humor himself that you could instantly see what he was talking about, and that if you adopted a way he wanted you to go, you could instantly see the humor in it, and you'd start, it would be funny. And I've worked with few directors like that.
How did he communicate effectively as a director to you as an actor?
He would sit and watch what you did, and he would say, Bob, he would talk just like, Bob, what would happen if you if you did this over here, if you slapped, if you punched him in the ribs as you passed by, what would happen if you did that? Something like that. And you could instantly see that that was a facet that could be played. He very seldom thought of things. It was just his genius. He very seldom thought of things that didn't work.
And are there some things that a director does that have the opposite effect, that were totally unhelpful to you?
No. I don't know. I remember Jay so well because I liked what he used to do. And when a director didn't or doesn't do that, I'm not very impressed, especially when we're supposed to be doing comedy.
Okay.